You know what would be funny? If you did what TNG did with Lower Decks, but the other way round. So you had a story about the upper deckers, or as we used to know them, the main characters. Space. A continuous extension interval between planets, stars, and other objects. These are the critiques of the critic McElvoy. His continuing mission to review strange new shows, to seek out new work and new bastardizations, to boldly note what no critic has noted before. Upper Deckers was built around a comic conceit. We won't spend too much time on it, but basically, this is the whole episode. Imagine that each tier of crew on a Federation starship is oblivious to the fact that the others also face regular danger. You know, enough to be the principal focus of a television series. We're kind of the stars of our own show, said Boimler, in a kind of meta self-referential boorish moment. And the lower deckers that we've become accustomed to just couldn't fathom that anything else could be happening that would be worthy of note on board the Cerritos. Weren't the bridge crew just, a set of boring senior officers, whom just got on with the day-to-day management stuff? Except, of course, they're Star Trek fans, so they have enough presence of mind to know that normally this isn't the case. Normally, bridge crews are the focus of all the weird and unusual things that occur to a crew in Starfleet. And if you think about it, that makes sense, doesn't it? Because primarily they're at the forefront of everything that's going on. And if something's going to happen to the ship, it's going to happen to the bridge crew first, usually. So you can see why, in the past, when Gene Roddenberry was putting together a show called Star Trek, he might have thought that's where the emphasis should be, on the senior officers. Because surely they're the people to whom most things would happen. But we don't think about it like that anymore, do we? Because boorishly we have to deconstruct everything, as I suppose I'm doing now, and highlight the sheer absurdity of it all. And so superficially, I suppose we all had a giggle when, Mariner et al. Said, hey, we're the only ones to whom anything interesting happens on this ship. Only for us to see a whole adventure very much in the traditional Trek mould, or occurring to the senior officers, of which our principal characters knew nothing. What an amusing idea. Except, it's never really been suggested, has it, that the rest of the crew are kind of oblivious to what's going on board a ship. It's just where you choose to point the camera. It's where you focalise your story. whose story is it? You know, there are lots of stories on the Enterprise D. If you chose to remake Star Trek The Next Generation from the perspective of its lower deckers, if we must use that term, then you could have very interesting variations on pre-established episodes, couldn't you? Because things like, I don't know, take the episode Q Who. Going to be a very interesting story from the perspective of low-ranking officers, particularly those who knew the poor sods that got tunnelled out into space by the Borg's weirdly specific drill beam. Weirdly specific drill beam, that sounds like something they'd say in Lower Decks, doesn't it? You see my point? There's 1,000 stories on the Enterprise D because there are 1,000 crew members. But you got to put the camera somewhere. And you don't have time to follow 1,000 characters, only maybe 5 or 6 and so on. But in a serious Star Trek show, no one would suggest that other crewmen are completely and totally oblivious to what's going on board the ship. In this episode, to make the comic conceit work, Mariner et al. Were completely oblivious to the invasion of the ship by an evil insectoid species called the Clickets. They knew nothing about it, absolutely nothing. Ship was attacked. An invasion force being developed. They didn't know a thing about it because it was happening principally to the bridge crew. So Upper Decks literalized the process by which we observe and consume Star Trek stories. It mistook the format of a show and the perspective that other shows adopt for the perspective of its own characters. And in some respect, that is an inversion of the truth, isn't it? Because on a real starship, everyone on board would be broadly aware of what was going on, and they'd certainly, be involved to some degree or another. But this is Lower Decks shtick, to appropriate the perspective of the audience member and dramatize it. Just as all of these irritating, boring characters know what we know as fans. They know about conflicts on board the Enterprise D, and they know about V'Ger, and they know everything that occurred during Star Trek the Motion Picture, etc., etc. Just as they know these things, they apparently also have some omniscient sense of how Star Trek stories are consumed by the audience on other Star Trek shows. Ooh. How very meta, how very clever of you to make that observation, Lower Decks writers. Give yourselves a slow hand clap for understanding how previous Star Trek shows work. Do you know why yours doesn't, I wonder? You don't dare go there, do you? So that's it. What more do you want? That's the episode. There's no more to say. Let's do anomalous readings. The Clickets in this episode, the insectoid invaders, a species that can't take compliments. That's very much from the sort of absurdist tombola of comic ideas, isn't it? I'm convinced there's such a thing in the Low Decks Riders Room. I'm sure there is a tombola. People just write down random stream of consciousness, just random shit of the sort that used to feature in the TNG Season 8 Twitter stream. And they just stick in all the gags. An insectoid alien species that can't take a compliment. Put that in at the beginning of every session where they're trying to break down a new episode, break a new story. They give it a spin and they pull out 5 little bits of paper and they go, okay, that's very good. And we'll put that with, the cat doctor gets off on pain. Mariner said that on other ships it's the command crew that get into danger. Well, actually, the whole crew gets into danger. Sometimes with catastrophic results. As I was saying before, you can't tell me that when a ship's been invaded or when it's in mortal danger, there are people on board who know absolutely nothing about it because of their rank. Well, we have been trapped in a time loop apparently for about 4 or 5 weeks now, and any time now we're likely to be blown up again. How do you know that? Well, I heard it in the turbo lift. Worf and Riker were talking. What? See, what? We've died like 4 or 5 times? Yeah. They haven't told any of us. They haven't bothered to tell. Well, we're only ensigns, aren't we? Don't get told that sort of thing. That's the way it is. But I'm due for promotion next year. If I become a lieutenant, maybe I'll start to be integrated into the plot a bit more. There was a kernel of a good idea here, in the sense that for a few minutes it felt almost like a real Star Trek episode because of the shift back to the command crew. And I liked the idea that they each had an ongoing plot or problem, which of course we normally know nothing about, like the Bajoran bloke who's haunted by the demons from that manifest from the Cardassian War or whatever. I like that. But unfortunately, in the end, it just made me sad that this is a show that doesn't focus on those characters. It focuses on Boimler and Mariner and Tendi and Rutherford. And even my favourite T'Lyn ended the episode by saying, boom. As in, boom, having cracked a joke. This show's so very nearly over, and yet it's still able to break my heart every single week. We will return next time for, yes, the penultimate episode of Lower Decks. May there be laughs.